Okay, this is the continuation of chapter 3. Writing sometime later to Josh Speed, who continued to support slavery, Lincoln was still vividly remembering the painful sight of the chained slaves they had once seen together on a steamboat. You remember as well as I do from that Louisville to the mouth of the Ohio River, there were on board 10 or a dozen slaves, shackled together with irons. That sight was a continual torment to me, and I see something like it every time I touch the Ohio or any other slave border. It is not fair for you to assume that I have no interest in a thing which has and continually exercises the power of making me miserable. You ought rather to appreciate how much the great body of the Northern people do crucify their feelings in order to maintain their loyalty to the Constitution of the Union. To Lincoln, slave breeders and slave traders were, in his words, quote, a small, odious, and detested class. Detested means hated. Not long afterward, Lincoln's great hero, Henry Clay, died. What Lincoln had admired most about Clay was his belief that the American Union, another term for the United States, should remain firmly together forever. The idea of the Union became almost holy to Lincoln. On July 6, 1852, he gave a long eulogy to the old senator at the state capitol building in Springfield. Retired or not, his neighbors still thought Lincoln the best public speaker in town and the ideal man to pay tribute to the old Whig lion. Although Clay himself had owned as many as 60 slaves, the politician known as the Great Compromiser had for years believed that enslaved people should be set free, but also returned to Africa, even if they had never lived there. Many other white people believed in this idea too. It became known as colonization, and it inspired supporters to form societies throughout the nation to argue for the idea of deporting black people. To modern ears, the idea sounds extremely racist. Even back then, a significant number of Americans thought it would be immoral, not to mention physically impossible, to gather up so many black people and ship them back across the ocean. Although most whites did not care what they thought or felt, African Americans, of course, believed they had every right to stay in this country. Free blacks argued that this wish could be respected by one and should be respected by one and all, since their ancestors had certainly not asked white slave traders to capture them in Africa and bring them here against their will in the first place. Besides, their families had lived here on American soil for generations, even centuries. Many people of color could trace their American roots back many more generations than the country's hundreds of thousands of more recent German and Irish-born immigrants. Nonetheless, even humane men like Lincoln were attracted to the colonization idea. They thought colonization could convince Southerners to give up slavery by calming their fears that once they were free, blacks would punish them for their years of mistreatment by attacking by attacking them. So they were worried that they'd mistreated them so badly when they're free, they'll come back and hurt them. Something to be worried about, huh? Lincoln himself did not participate in Springfield's colonization society. He was never a joiner, but when he rose to offer his tribute to Henry Clay, he surely had this so-called solution very much in his mind. Clay, he noted with admiration, had first proposed the idea as far back as 1816. He had stressed its moral fitness and believed that once slaves were freed and transplanted in a foreign land, they will carry back to their native soil the rich fruits of civilization, law, and liberty. To Lincoln, every succeeding year has added strength to the hope that colonization would occur. May it indeed be realized, he proclaimed. It was time, he added, for restoring a captive people to their long-lost fatherland with bright prospects for the future. There can be little doubt about where Abraham Lincoln stood on the slavery issue at this time. He hated the idea of it. The thought of the cruelty of slavery haunted him. But at this time, only 8 years before he ran for president, he was certainly not yet a great emancipator. He was more like a great colonizer, but he was not really yet great enough himself to accomplish much in any field. Where the subject of race was concerned, he still had a good deal to learn, and he soon would. That's the end of chapter 3.